He ended up here, the St. Rochus Hospital, as director of the maternity ward. When Semmelweis first came to this hospital, the maternity unit was in a terrible state. 1 in 3 women who came here to give birth died of childbed fever. Semmelweis was about to change that. He started a rigorous campaign of cleanliness. Hands, linen, instruments, all had to be cleaned between patients. The hospital has been modernized. 150 years ago, Semmelweis prowled these corridors trying to catch people who were disobeying his orders. He did not make friends, but he did make progress. It took him 6 years, but he managed to cut death rates from over 30% to less than 1%. Meanwhile, in Vienna, where they had abandoned his methods, hundreds of women now died every year from hospital-caught infections. But the Hungarians were as cynical as the Viennese. And this disbelief, combined with Semmelweis's rather bullying style, meant once again he managed to alienate the hospital staff. And the knowledge that no one was listening to him was starting to drive him mad.
Semmelweis, who has made the most extraordinary and brilliant discovery, can't explain that discovery to doctors in a way that makes sense to them. He knows how to prevent deaths by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands, and no one will listen to him. It's the most dreadful position to be in, and he cannot stand it.
Semmelweis was desperate. He used to come regularly to this chapel, which is attached to the hospital, to pray to God for his forgiveness. He began writing to doctors, accusing them of being murderers, and he would break down in lectures with bouts of uncontrollable weeping. He would also go out into the streets, stop any couples he met, and implore them to make sure, should they ever have children, their doctors washed their hands before delivering. His young wife found it increasingly hard to cope with his behaviour. Driven to despair, Semmelweis now decided to do what he'd been avoiding for years: write a book. In 1860, sitting at this desk, Semmelweis finally finished writing up his life work. Unfortunately, it is rather rambling and repetitious, but it does contain the essence of his ideas.
The carrier is the examining finger, the operating hand, instruments, bed linen, atmospheric air, sponges.
It was an insight that could have saved thousands of lives. For doctors who approach this book with an open mind, it's all here. But Semmelweis spoils it somewhat by spending the last half of the book launching a long and vitriolic attack on all his many critics. And with the book, he sent out venomous, ranting letters.
And you, Herr Professor, have been partner in this massacre. Murderous deeds which were committed by the midwives and physicians in Würzburg. Childbed fever. I declare before God and the world that you are a murderer.
The book was badly received and fed his already evident paranoia. He took to heavy drinking and to prostitutes. With his behaviour becoming increasingly erratic, his wife reluctantly agreed to a plot concocted by Semmelweis's doctors. She proposed a family holiday to Austria. When they got to Vienna, his wife suggested they go and visit a friend's hospital. But when they arrived, Semmelweis was seized and dragged off to a padded cell. The hospital was, in fact, a lunatic asylum. What happened next is confused. There are different stories. He was either beaten up or he cut his finger. But whatever the reason, days after arriving in the asylum, he became very ill. He developed multiple abscesses, a swollen abdomen, and rising fever. He died 2 weeks later of septicemia, blood poisoning, the same condition that had killed his friend and all those women. He's buried here in the family home, quite literally in the family home, behind this wall. He was just 47 when he died. And there's a final tragic twist. By the time Semmelweis died, someone else had already found the missing piece of the puzzle that could explain why dirty hands cause disease. In France, Louis Pasteur had proven that microbes cause decay. Sadly, Semmelweis seems to have died never knowing of Pasteur's work. But in the year of his death, a young Scotsman finally put together all the pieces of the puzzle and finished what Semmelweis himself had tried so very hard to do. Joseph Lister was a keen young Scottish surgeon who, unlike Semmelweis, had read Pasteur's paper on bacteria. Lister realized that if Pasteur was right, then they were actually being killed by invisible microbes. But what could he do about it? One day, a friend of his came onto the wards and cried, "Oh my God, this place smells of sewage." This was a eureka moment. Sewage, of course, sewage. Why not try and curb infections using the same chemicals they used to deodorize sewage? Carbolic acid. Lister soaked his instruments with it before his next operation, surgery on a young boy. The boy survived, so he did it again. Soon his death rates had fallen by an astonishing 2/3. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you that British surgeons embraced this new idea with enormous enthusiasm. But in fact, it wasn't until he moved to London 12 years later and started doing pioneering knee surgery that they really sat up and took notice. Slowly, surgeons accepted the need to wash hands and instruments in carbolic acid. Before Lister, most patients did not survive major operations, but the introduction of antiseptic techniques changed all that. It finally turned surgery from butchery into a science.